Hello, I'm going to title this presentation Journalism, Suicide and Murder, the corruption leading to suicide on the part of media, and unanswered questions about murder. Now, this presentation owes its origin to a talk I gave at the University of Southern California's Annenberg Institute for Media on Monday. Someone forgot to push the record button. I have the slides. I thought in my own ego that this was too good to let go. So I'm recording essentially the same presentation I made then. I had earlier last fall talked about Russia and Ukraine. This is a media class, so the focus was on how the media has treated Russia and Ukraine. I was asked back this time, this is Robert Scher's class, a very large class on journalism. I was asked back to talk about Russiagate and its pivotal, its cornerstone, really, namely Russian hacking. It's a long story. I've been very close to it for many years, and my task was to try to boil it down onto a few slides so that the students could assimilate what I was saying and, not least, realize its importance. Because let's face it, 80% of the American people believe that the Russians hacked into the Democratic National Committee, gave those emails very damaging to Hillary Clinton, gave those emails to WikiLeaks, and it was all well planned, and it was designed to make sure that Hillary didn't win. And of course, she didn't win. And so the whole thing was attributed to Trump and his collaboration with the Russians to make sure that Hillary didn't win. Now, Americans are like 65% mistrusting of the major media now. And yet, most of them still have been brainwashed, and I use the term advisedly, brainwashed into thinking about Russiagate and why is that consequential? Well, we just avoided war with Russia before Biden administration left. It was as close to war with Russia as I've seen, and I've been around a very long time. Now we have a different situation. People need to know that what they've been told by the media ain't so. And as the end of this little introduction, I would like to quote Will Rogers, the humorist of the last century, even before I was born, okay? And what he said was, look, the problem is this. The problem is not what you don't know. It's what you do know that ain't so. So bear with me. This is going to take some detail, but I've tried, believe it or not, to boil it down into its bare items here. Okay, we go back to 2016 before the election. June 12th, all of a sudden, bombshell. Julian Assange of WikiLeaks says, we have emails related to Hillary Clinton pending publication. My God, emails relating to Hillary Clinton. They could be very embarrassing. On July 10th, less than a month later, the Democratic National Committee worker Seth Rich was murdered on the streets of Washington very early in the morning. The motive was said to be robbery, but nothing was taken, curiously enough. And also, curiously enough, the FBI runs in and takes over from the DC police. On July 22nd, this is all 2016 now, we're in the months before the election, WikiLeaks posts these DNC, again, Democratic National Committee emails, showing that the DNC and Hillary Rodham Clinton had tilted the playing field in the Democratic Party so that Sanders' chances to be nominated didn't stand a snowball's chance in hell. August 9th, Assange Julian Assange of WikiLeaks speaks out. He implies that Seth Rich was his source. And as a matter of fact, he announces a $20,000 reward for information leading to the conviction for the murder of Seth Rich. May we have the next slide, please? This next slide is titled, The Democrats Say That Russia Hacked to Hurt Hillary. Okay, well, it's very clear. That's the way it came out. But not many people were willing to acknowledge that or to realize it or to believe accomplished reporters, analysts like Patrick Lawrence, who was a good friend of mine. He tells a story of doing one great big exhale when Clinton's folks blamed the hack on Russia. He immediately smelled that rat, and you can see his exhale on my website, raymcgovern.com. Just put in my search box there. Patrick Lawrence saw through it from the start. He said he was sickened as he watched what he immediately recognized was a well-planned and highly significant, magnificent diversion. The Clinton-friendly media was excoriating Russia for hacking DNC emails, and was glossing over what the DNC emails showed, namely that the playing field had been tilted against Bernie Sanders. So what Patrick Lawrence, he said he had fire in his belly on the morning of July 25th, the first day of the Democratic National Committee convention in 2016. He says, what followed was pretty much a long, furious exhale within 12 hours of when the media started really pushing our Russians did it narrative. I suggest that I pretty much really encourage you to look at Patrick Lawrence's piece. Patrick Lawrence saw it from the start, and it's on my website, raymcgovern.com. What happened next? Well, by her own admission, Clinton's PR chief, Jennifer Palmieri, was sent out on a golf cart of all things to go around to the outlets, the media outlets, and try to sell this story during the convention. And she complained publicly in print, I couldn't sell it. It was too much of a jump. I mean, I was getting But then, says Jennifer Palmieri, when we got back to Brooklyn, DNC headquarters, man, then people came, intelligence people, journalist people, they came giving us a little information that, the Russians did hack, but it went into September and there was still no real stuff to grab. But then on October 1st, thank you, Jesus, in came a joint report from the head of National Intelligence, James Clapper, and the head of Department of Homeland Security, Jay Johnson. They put together a memo which said, yes, the Russians hacked, even though they had no evidence. Why do we say they had no evidence? Well, Jay Johnson later complained, Obama made us do this memo before CrowdStrike, which was the cyber firm that James Comey, the FBI chief, delegated to do the forensics on the DNC computers, okay? They hadn't reported yet. Matter of fact, they never reported. We'll see that story as we go on. So Jay Johnson is a lawyer, right? He doesn't really like being used this way. He complained about it later in court testimony. May we have the next slide, please? So as this next slide depicts, Clinton blamed her loss, and so did all the Democrats and most of the media, on Russian hacking. Now, we in veteran intelligence professionals for Sanity have expertise that just won't quit, including two former intelligence technical directors from the National Security Agency, NSA, and another high-ranking official there that worked on precisely these kinds of things. So we put them to work. We said, something smells funny about this Russian hacking. You're technical experts. You actually devised the trace routes and all the things that it would show up in. Write us a memo and we'll edit it and figure out what to say. And so they did. And on December 12th, we're still talking at a time when Trump was president-elect, okay? We ruled out, that is, VIPS ruled out that we said the DNC emails were leaked by an insider, like with Snowden and Manning. It could have been anybody with access to NSA databases and perhaps someone within the DNC, because we knew that some people within the DNC did have access to NSA material. Now, as I said before, we had two technical directors, former, of the NSA working on this memo, and they drew on not only the principles of physics and their prior work, but also on the material that Ed Snowden had brought out into Hong Kong in June, I think it was, 2013. So, I mean, we even put slides. We put Snowden's slides in there, top secret slides, in our piece, and consortium knows. And again, remember, the date was December 12th, 2016. And maybe we have the next slide, please. 2017. So in comes Trump, almost, okay? He's still president-elect. And Obama and his intelligence minions complete what they called an intelligence community community assessment that says Russia hacked in order to help Trump win. Now, that was no intelligence community assessment. It was written by John Brennan and some hand-picked analysts. They got NSA and FBI reluctantly to agree to it. It was bogus, and we'll show how it's bogus. They accepted the Russian hacking with no evidence at all. So we wrote another memo, this one just before Obama left. Our memo says, hey, we'd really like to have some proof that the Russians hacked. And, on the 18th, what did he do? He got up at a press conference and he admitted, Obama, the lawyer, wanted to cover his derriere. He admitted, that we really don't know how those emails got to WikiLeaks. Whoa, isn't that interesting? Nobody asked them any further questions, okay? Now, I had a chance, so that was the 18th. Obama left and Trump came in on the 20th, of course. So on the 25th, there's this big shindig at one of these Democratic think tanks, so to speak. And as was my wont in those days, I went to every one of them that let me in, so I was there, okay? And who was speaking but Adam Schiff? And he said lots of times, the Russians hacked, the Russians hacked, the Russians hacked, okay? And McGovern's like this, no, they wouldn't answer. They wouldn't recognize me. So I went up afterwards, not knowing that the mic was still on and that even the video was still on. It's a 2-minute segment I didn't know existed, but someone showed it to me. It's worth looking at to see what Adam Schiff claimed he had, whereas in effect, he did not have. Could Jose, can we show that YouTube, just 2 minutes? I warn the audience, if you fall asleep, you'll miss the whole thing.
My name is Ray McGovern. I served in CIA under 7 presidents and 9 directors. Well, thank you very much. We have a little alumni group full of veteran intelligence professionals for Sanity, and we've been following this issue very closely. one of our members is the former technical director of NSA. I'm interested in 1 week ago when the president said this, I don't want to misquote him. The conclusions of the intelligence community with respect to Russian hacking were not conclusive regarding WikiLeaks. In other words, there's a big gap between alleged Russian hacking and WikiLeaks. The intelligence community does not know how or if that information, to the degree it exists, got to WikiLeaks. Now, you assert as flat fact that Russia did this. Do you know more than Obama?
Well, I would never claim to know more than Obama. I think he's a brilliant man.
It's a very serious question.
No, it's a serious question. I have every confidence in the intelligence of the Russian hacking of both the DNC as well as John Podesta.
James Clapper is a convicted.
You asked me a question. You want to hear the answer?
I will.
While I can't go into the classified information, I have every confidence that the Russians used WikiLeaks, whether Julian Assange was a knowing participant or, as the Russians would describe, a useful idiot. That we will hopefully find out, but I don't have any question in the conclusions of the intelligence.
You have every confidence, but no evidence. Is that right?
No, I can't share the evidence with you.
Yeah,
Congressman,
That-
I'm Paul
that's
Joy,
bogus.
former
That's
Director
bogus.
of Security Senate Intelligence Committee.
Now, for those who watched that 2-minute segment, you could see that Adam Schiff was correct about one thing, and that was simply that he couldn't share that evidence with me. The reason for that, of course, there was no evidence to share with me. It was all made up. So much for the political hacks that push this story to make sure that Trump was pretty much emasculated and blamed for cooperating with Russia to defeat Hillary. Let's turn to the media, okay? We, VIPS, Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, have great trouble getting into the mainstream media. But we did do this one memo on July 24th when we had further evidence that there was not a hack, but that it was a download from the computer. This is a copy, not a hack. There's no trace on the internet. Okay, that's the big difference. We explained that in our December 12, 2016 memo. We went into great detail about it. So it was not a hack. It was a copy from pretty much a thumb drive, we could tell, because of the speed with which this was copied. Okay, now, it was our conclusion that this data was copied onto an external storage device, like a thumb drive, by a person with physical access to a DNC computer. Now, there are a couple of honest, enterprising journalists around. One is a personal friend of mine. His name is Patrick Lawrence, and he was very intrigued by all this, having recognized, as I said before, right off the bat, this was a charade. This was a noxious lie, okay? And so he pretty much interrogated not only us, not only the NSA former technical directors, but the forensic experts we had. One worked for a major telecom firm and had just retired. One was in London working very hard on this issue, and their expertise just wouldn't quit. So yes, we sought outside expertise. We didn't think that CrowdStrike, the cyber firm, again, hired by James Comey, incidentally, you should know that Firefox, or not Firefox, but CrowdStrike is run by Sean Henry. Sean Henry worked for FBI Director Robert Mueller for about 12 years as his chief techie, and then was set up to run CrowdStrike. As I said before, CrowdStrike was the one to run the forensics on what happened, how the Russians hacked into the DNC. Okay, so Patrick Lawrence says, all right, I've interrogated all you guys. Now I'm going to write. He got the Nation to approve that he would write an article on it, and he did. It was masterful. It included almost everything that was known at the time. And he concluded former NSA experts say last year that the DNC hack wasn't a hack at all, but a leak, a copy onto a thumb drive, an inside job by someone with access to the DNC's system. There was a mutiny at the progressive liberal Nation. This was not what Hillary said, and so it must not only be wrong, but it needs to be defeated. And those people on the Nation news desk mounted such a furor that, well, the editor felt forced to, well, actually seek agents within VIPS, agents other than the former NSA technical directors, and construct a fable that not everybody agrees with, not even in FBI. Well, long story short, it was really nasty sort of stuff, okay? Worse than that, after this furor, after the Nation had defamed Patrick Lawrence for telling the truth, as Patrick wrote later, I was fired when the Klieg lights were off. Gently let go, having been a correspondent or actually a contributor to the Nation for decades. Now let's have the next slide, please. Now we're still in 2017. Finally, the Republican-dominated Intelligence Committee in the House, dominated until the end of that year, mind you, because of the election, the midterm, forces testimony by the head of CrowdStrike. Sean Henry is his name, the fellow I mentioned before. Now, it's really interesting. I have the whole transcript. I actually printed out, lest it disappear from the ether, okay? And it was quite amazing that Sean Henry admitted, just to steal my thunder here, that there is, quote, no concrete evidence, end quote, that Russia hacked the DNC emails. No evidence that Russia hacked them. No evidence that anybody hacked the DNC emails. It was gotten some other way, not by a hack. So Adam Schiff of recent memory here, he's kind of asking these tough questions, and apparently he didn't know what the true answers were, or maybe he thought Sean Henry would dissemble like everyone else. But Sean Henry started to answer. He was reminded by his counsel, "You're under oath, you're under oath." Yeah, right, okay. And this is what he says, Schiff, do you know the date, Mr. Henry, on which the Russians exfiltrated the data from the DNC? Well, when would that have been, Mr. Henry? Counsel just reminded me that we have indicators that the data was exfiltrated from the DNC, but we have no indicators that it was exfiltrated. Now, there are times when we can see that exfiltrated, and we can say conclusively, but in this case, it appears the data was set up to be exfiltrated, but we just don't have the evidence that it actually left. Whoa. No concrete evidence that Russia or anyone else hacked those DNC emails. Now, what about this business about we have evidence that the data was set up to be exfiltrated, but no evidence left? Well, our technical experts in VIPS Say, well, hello, it was set up to be copied, for God's sake. That's what whoever it was had access to the DNC computers, set up to be exfiltrated. It was not exfiltrated. It was not put on the internet. It was copied onto a thumb drive. Wow. Now, that's 2017, mind you. May we have the next slide, please? Okay, before we get to this slide, I want to put a little context around it. So you don't have to look at this slide. Listen to me, because this is really interesting. We finished with 2016, 2017, and before we get to 2020, let's do 2019. Around this time, Seymour Hersh reported. Woo, what did he say? He said in a deposition in a court case that it was, quote, absolutely true that his source told him that Seth Rich transmitted emails to WikiLeaks and requested payment, period, end quote. Hersh describes his source as, quote, very, very knowledgeable, end quote, someone senior in the intelligence community, and a person that Hersh had known for 30 years. Whoa. Now, if you want to see more on that, just go to my website, raymcgovern.com. There's a long article entitled FBI, Another Fraud on the Court. Again, on my website, you could fill in your knowledge about that. Also, in 2019, a whole series of interesting things happened as I reconstructed from my notes. Okay, what's the first thing? Well, Trump started to get smart about how the intelligence community and the FBI were playing him. On the 28th of July, he announced that he was firing Dan Coats, a Republican functionary no smarter than his colleague Dan Quayle from Indiana. He had been foisted on Trump as the Director of National Intelligence. Trump announced he's gone. He's gone on August 15th. Okay. Whoa. What next? Well, they put up James Risen. Did some good work for the New York Times. Now he was put up there on something called The Rising, run by the Hill newspaper. And he was deliberately put up there to say, these technical directors from VIPS, like Bill Binney, they've gone conspiracy theorist. This business about the Russians not hacking. Oh, give me a break, James Risen. Okay, when was that? Let's see, what do my notes say here? That was August 5th, 2019. You getting the picture here? They're starting to, the people perpetuating this myth are starting to get a little nervous because Trump is showing that, well, maybe as president, he can unearth all this stuff and display it in all its gory detail. Now, what else did Trump do? Trump announced that Texas Republican Representative John Ratcliffe, incidentally, John Ratcliffe is the new head of the CIA under Trump. He had aggressively questioned former special counsel Robert Mueller during the congressional hearings involving Mueller's report on whether the Russians interfered or not in the election. Of course, his report said they didn't, but you would never know that from mainstream media. So they announced, that is, Trump announced that John Ratcliffe was going to replace Dan Coats. Well, into the early months of 2020, we had Ratcliffe, and then we had this fellow, what was his name, Grinnell. They played musical chairs, but after Ratcliffe got finished interrogating, and that's what it was like, Robert Mueller for his report, he finally, he and Grinnell persuaded President Trump, look, Mr. President, you know that Adam Schiff has been really playing fast and loose, saying he has evidence that he doesn't. You know that Devin Nunes has been tearing his head out for you to release this information. For God's sake, why don't you consider releasing the testimony of Sean Henry going back a couple of years to December 5th, 2017? That shows that Russiagate and the Russian hacking is what you call it, a hoax. And Trump says, oh, I can do that? Yeah, you can do that. How did I do that? Well, Ratcliffe and Grinnell say, look, you have us call Schiff. He's the chair of the House Intelligence Committee. Have us call Schiff and say, look, the president says you released that testimony going back almost 2.5 years now. Oh, we will. We'll do it tomorrow. The next day, and now we can turn to this slide. The next day was May 7th, 2020. So after keeping Sean Henry's confession on the lock and key, remember the confession was December 5, 2017. Oh, for 2.5 years, or almost 2.5 years, Schiff is told to release it publicly, or it was Grinnell at the time, acting National Intelligence Director, I will. Okay. Gosh, what happened? Was it released? Yeah, it was released. Oh, the mainstream media missed it. And that, my friends, is precisely why most Americans still believe, and why the mainstream media still feel entitled to propound the myth that the Russians hacked in order to defeat Hillary, to help Trump, and that the Russians are devils incarnate. Now, this last sentence here on this slide goes back to how this all started with my lecture to Robert Scher's class at UNC. He had assigned, and very, very wisely assigned to his class to read before my lecture a wonderful piece by an investigative reporter who is almost as good as Cy Hirsch. His name is Jeff Gerth. He did incredible work for the New York Times back in the day when the New York Times did some incredible work like Cy Hirsch's work. And they asked, that is, Jeff Gerth was hired by the Columbia Journalism Review to review all this stuff. And he did. Years. He sat out there at Berkeley at their media graduate program and researched this and researched this and researched it. And he came up with a 4-part study published by the Columbia Journalism Review in January 2023. And I think that may be in the next slide. All right, now that title kind of gives away my story here, but we're talking about Jeff Gerth and his article in the Columbia Journalism Review, and it was 4 parts, very, very long. Title was Press versus President. It was put out in January 30th, 2023. Whoa, we're way ahead now. We've given Jeff Gerth lots of time to research all this, and he does. And to his credit, it is an indictment of the craven state of U.S. journalism. Now, there was something missing. As I hinted at the last slide, Gerth missed the testimony of Sean Henry, which put the lie to the whole business about Russia hacking, which in turn was the cornerstone of Russiagate. Okay. Now, Jeff is a terrific guy. It took me a while to figure out how to get in touch with him, but I did get in touch with him. And I said, Jeff, did you know? Did you miss the testimony of Sean Henry? I no, no, no. He says, I know about that. I read all your stuff, all your VIPS stuff. I said, well, it wasn't in your article. I said, oh, yes, it was. I said, no, it wasn't. I respect Jeff. He's almost as old as I am. He's been at it a long time. He did the best he could. But what happened to his final draft? He did have that story, that key story in his initial draft. But his editor, well, for one thing, I found out that his editor's wife worked for the New York Times, and the New York Times doesn't come up really well in Jeff's article. Jeff says, look, I'm tired about this. I had Sean Henry's testimony in the draft. How it got cut out, I don't know. My editor made cuts and changes at the very end. He sent it back to me without edit trace, making it very difficult to figure out what had happened with his edit. I was coming down with COVID toward the end, making things worse. I won't go on. What's the story here? The story is that Jeff Gerth did this exhaustive review of the Columbia School of Journalism review, cut very important things out of it, delayed. He submitted his draft in May of 2022, which is shown on that slide. And he told me during our first conversation that the editors, quote, toned it down quite some, end quote. Now, he explained that the whole project was in doubt until Bob Woodward made some comments about John Brennan, how Brennan had admitted that some of his senior Russian experts did not agree with the tale about Russian hacking. That somehow allowed Jeff to say, okay, editors, for God's sake, will you get it out there then? Well, it got out there. It's in turgid prose. It's not searchable. I had to read those 4 parts one more time to make sure that I had this right. Jeff didn't remember whether it was in there or not. There's a story here. There's a story that is really condemnatory of journalism. Now, this was 2023. I want to go back to 2019 and 2020 to finish telling this story. May we have the next slide, please? Now, I mentioned before about what seemed to be happening in 2019, where we had, Dan Coates being fired as Director of National Intelligence. We had James Risen doing the bidding of the media, calling Bill Binney, of all people, a conspiracy theorist, Bill being the quintessential analyst at NSA. Even those who don't like what he said admit that he was the brightest guy to talk in their doorstep, okay? And then we had Ratcliffe being appointed, and look like things were gonna come to a head. So what happens? That fall, 2019, Bill Binney, Ed Loomis, the two former technical directors of the NSA, Kurt Beebe, one of their senior analysts, gets subpoenaed. In this case, Aaron Rich. Aaron is Seth Rich's brother. Aaron Rich against Bukowski. Okay. Now, I have to admit that when I saw these people who were responsible primarily for that December 12, 2000 2016 memo, which said it couldn't have been a hack, it had to be a copy. Okay. I had a little bit of subpoena envy. I mean, why didn't they subpoena me? Well, I didn't have long to wait. December 3rd, 2019. Take a look at that slide. Okay. Aaron Rich, subpoena to produce documents, information, or objects. Okay. To Ray McGovern. The date was December 3, 2019. It was very odd indeed. I had never encountered anything like this in my entire professional life. When we have the next slide, please, to show what the subpoena was all about. All right, this is the essence of the subpoena, okay? One, they wanted from my computer and from my desk, all documents and communications relating to claims that one, the DNC was not hacked by the Russians in 2016, or two, that the DNC data was leaked and not hacked, including but not limited to claims made in memos below, memos of which we are very, very proud. There's the one on the bottom from 2016, December 12th. The one from July 24th, where we had conclusive evidence about the copy onto a external storage device, and then one other in which we demanded. Well, that was the one from when we were demanding proof from whoever was in charge at that time that it was a hack and not a leak. So why is this coming here? Why is Aaron Rich subpoenaing me for my records to demonstrate, my records, which are very clear, indicating, and Bill Binney's and Ed Loomis's as well, that it was not a hack by Russia or anything else, but a leak. You see, there was this was the part one for the subpoena. Part two was any and all records having to do with the Seth or Aaron Rich family. Whoa. Now, I won't tell you what my initial response to that subpoena was. It was very dismissive. It was ironic in that we commended Aaron Rich for trying to find out who really killed his brother. And that was a really good example of being your brother's keeper. And then I got a response back, second subpoena. No, we don't want that. We want all your records. So I did what Binney and Loomis and Kurt Gebe did. I sorted out to the best I could all my records and gave it to the lawyers for the DNC. Okay, that's what was going on here. There was a DNC shepherd with the Rich family all this time, making sure that everything came out okay. And when Fox News finally settled for a major sum of money, then we were not subpoenaed anymore. I'll leave it to your imagination as to what was afoot there. Maybe we have the next slide, Jose. Let's take a look at the implications, which I hope should be pretty clear by now. Why is this so key, so crucial? Why do I describe it as the cornerstone of Russiagate, this business of Russia hacking? Well, we know that Obama, knowing that it was a hoax, knowing there was no proof of this, expelled, I think it was 35 Russian diplomats, confiscated Russian diplomatic property in this country, and persuaded most Americans to believe that Hillary Clinton was defeated by the Russians, okay? Oh, so the suppressed truth here that Russia did not hack, that nobody hacked the DNC for those emails, that's the key dimension, okay? In other words, why is it key? Because it proves open and shut connivance among the media, the deep state intelligence, and the DNC. And that, my friends, is precisely why that truth is untouchable. That's why Jeff Gerth's editors at the Columbia Journalism Review needed to drop it on the cutting room floor. Another word about the Columbia Journalism Review: you couldn't think of a more establishment, right? Okay. Way back when they were looking at why it was so much reported that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, the head of the Washington Post op-ed section, name was Fred Hyatt, okay? He was interviewed by the Columbia Journalism Review. And some rather honest underclassmen, I imagine, asked him, Mr. Hyatt, just last year, 2 years ago, all the op-eds on your page, and you yourself was saying that the presence of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq was flat fact. Now it turns out that, well, that was not right. So how do you explain that? And you know what Fred Hyatt said? And this is a quote. He said, well, if there were no weapons of mass destruction there in Iraq, we probably shouldn't have said that there were. I was with my mentor, the late Bob Perry, when that came through. Bob took me by the shoulder. He said, Ray, I think that's sort of a core principle of journalism. You're not supposed to say something is true if it's not true. I mean, hello. Okay. So that's the Columbia journalism people, my God, are they not ashamed of themselves? And that there's a fault to me to point out that they cut out the most important part of Jeff Gerth's 4-part exhaustive review. It shouldn't fall to me, but okay, I welcome it. I'm not dead yet. I'm going to keep saying these things. Okay, so that's one reason why the truth is untouchable, because it shows there's open connivance between these 3 parts of the deep state, not only media and intelligence, but in this case, the Democratic Party itself. Now, this is the neuralgic thing, folks, and you may wonder why I put his name in that slide in the beginning. His name is Seth Rich. You're not allowed to say it, because immediately you are branded by people like James Risen and the rest of the people as a conspiracy theorist. Now, do you know where that term got its real life? I'll tell you where. When John Kennedy was killed, okay, and when Earl Warren recruited Alan Dulles, the former head of the CIA, who had lots of grievances against President Kennedy, when he appointed Alan Dulles to be pretty much executive director, a member of the Warren Commission, okay, people were saying, my God, there are a lot of people thinking that incentives, certainly the CIA, and certainly Alan Dulles could do this. I mean, why would you pick somebody with this kind of stake in it? And you know what Alan Dulles said? And the media repeated? Conspiracy theorist. That's a conspiracy theory. Don't believe these folks, a conspiracy theory. Well, I'll let that matter of John Kennedy's murder rest. But there is another murder that has not been solved. This has to do with this young man, 27 years old. His name is Seth Rich. I showed you what Julian Assange said about him, and that he offered a $20,000 reward for information leading to the murderer of Seth Rich. I guess, it's okay to be human as a reporter, as an analyst. We have 5 children, 2 sons, two sons that are twice the age of Seth Rich, 27, when he died. I can't bear the thought that their lives will be cut off halfway from where they are now. Okay, last thing here. Are we ever going to find out what happened to Seth Rich? Well, that very case, the subpoena of which I showed you, is still ongoing. Now, the FBI at first pretended that they had no records, not a trace, no records of Seth Rich in this court case. And a very persistent lawyer showed the judge that they had lots of records. And the judge asked the FBI, "Are you saying again under oath that you have no records on Seth Rich?" And they said, "Yes." And then he found out, "Oh, no, we were wrong, Judge. It's not a problem of no records anymore. It's just we have too many. We have thousands of them. And it's going to take months and months to put them in the right order. So, and COVID's going on, and, you know, it's going to be awful. But yeah, we have the records." So the judge gives them a deadline. And then another deadline. Oh, they asked for an extension. Well, guess what, folks? The last deadline was February 7th, 2025. The Bureau, the FBI came back, "Oh, we need another month." The judge gave them one more month. Now, within a week, the FBI is going to have to come through with what Judge Mazzant has ordered, or they will obfuscate some more. All this obfuscation, by the way, has taken place under Christopher Wray as FBI director. He's gone now. Oh, who took his place? Oh my God, Kash Patel. Now, Kash Patel uniquely knows where all the bodies are buried. He served on the House Intelligence Committee. He knows everything about Adam Schiff and the shenanigans that went on there. And if Kash Patel wants to know who arranged the killing of Seth Rich, my bet is that he can do that and that he will do that. So tune in, folks. March 7th. Let's see if Judge Mazzant hangs tough as he has for the last 3, 4, 5 years and persists in forcing out of the FBI their records on Seth Rich. You'll remember my saying that they immediately took over the case, took over his personal desk, his personal computer, his desktop, and they said, "Well, don't worry about it, we'll take care of all this." And yet they initially pretended then that they didn't have any records. So what I'm saying here is that we're gonna find out maybe if Kash Patel persists, and if the judge hangs tough, we may find out more when the FBI offers the records that have been asked for 5 years. Now, would I bet on it? My experience with the FBI in these matters is not such that I would give many odds that even Kash Patel can prevail. But if anybody can, he can. And, you know, call me human, but I care about a 27-year-old young man killed at the prime of his life for reasons that I suspect were political. I'll leave it there and would invite your questions, but looks like on this particular transmission, there'll be no Q&A. I invite your Q&A in other matters, in other means. Thanks very much for listening. I hope I was reasonably clear.